Imagine being trapped, not for minutes, not for hours, but for days, unable to move, unable to escape. Your body slowly turning against you, the sun above you, the insects around you, and the world watching as time becomes your executioner. This is the story of Scaphism, an ancient punishment so disturbing that many historians still debate whether it truly happened the way it was described. It has been called one of the worst execution methods in history. But behind the horror lies a deeper question. Was Scaphism a real practice of the Persian Empire, or was it a story amplified by its enemies? To understand Scaphism, we have to travel back to the ancient world, to the era of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, one of the largest and most powerful empires the world had ever seen. Stretching from the Indus Valley to parts of Europe and North Africa, Persia was not a fringe civilization. It was a superpower of its time. And like many ancient empires, it ruled through a mixture of administration, military force, and, at times, fear. The word Scaphism comes from the Greek word scaph, meaning boat or trough. According to the ancient Greek writer Plutarch, Scaphism was a method of execution in which a condemned person was trapped between two hollowed-out boats or wooden troughs. The body would be enclosed so that only the head, hands, and feet remained exposed. But confinement was only the beginning. The victim was reportedly force-fed milk and honey. The mixture would drip over their face and body. More would be poured onto exposed skin. Then the boats would be set afloat on a stagnant body of water, a marsh or pond. Under the blazing sun, the milk and honey would attract insects, flies, wasps, other parasites. Over time, the victim's own bodily waste would accumulate inside the confined space. Infection would set in, insects would breed. The process could last for days, even weeks, before death finally came through dehydration, exposure, or septic shock. It is difficult to even describe such a method without discomfort, and that discomfort is important. Because whether fully accurate or not, this account was meant to evoke horror. The most famous story involving Scaphism comes from Plutarch's life of Artaxerxes. He describes the execution of a Persian soldier named Mithridates, who had claimed credit for killing Cyrus the Younger during a rebellion against King Artaxerxes II. According to Plutarch, the king, angered by the soldier's boastful claim, ordered him to be executed by Scaphism. The punishment allegedly lasted 17 days before death occurred. 17 days. But here is where we must slow down. Plutarch was a Greek writer living centuries after the height of the Persian Empire. His accounts were based on earlier sources, many of which were Greek, and Greece and Persia were longtime rivals. From the Greco-Persian wars to cultural competition, Greek writers often portrayed Persians as decadent, cruel, or morally corrupt. This does not automatically mean Scaphism was fictional, but it does mean we must approach the account with caution. Ancient history is complicated. Many of the records we rely on were written by observers with biases, political motivations, or limited access to first-hand information. The Persian Empire itself left relatively few detailed records about criminal punishments. Much of what we know comes from outside perspectives, so the question becomes, was Scaphism a real, systematic punishment? Or was it an exaggerated tale designed to portray Persia as barbaric? Modern historians are divided. Some argue that while ancient executions could certainly be brutal, the prolonged nature described in Scaphism accounts may be embellished. Others suggest that extreme punishments were occasionally used in cases of treason or political betrayal, especially when rulers wanted to make an example of someone. What we do know is that ancient empires often used spectacle as a tool of control. Public punishment served a purpose. It reinforced authority. It discouraged rebellion. It reminded citizens of the consequences of disloyalty. In that context, even a single case of Scaphism, real or exaggerated, would have been powerful propaganda. The story itself becomes part of the punishment. There is also a biological question. Could a human being realistically survive for weeks under such conditions? Some medical experts suggest that, depending on hydration and environmental factors, survival for extended periods might be possible. The body is remarkably resilient, but also vulnerable to infection. Prolonged exposure to waste, insect larvae, and contaminated water would almost certainly lead to septicemia. Whether the exact timeline of 17 days is precise or dramatized, the concept reflects a chilling understanding of slow suffering. But here is something even more unsettling. The horror of Scaphism is not only physical, it is psychological. Imagine being conscious as time stretches endlessly, watching insects gather, feeling your body weaken day by day. Knowing that your death is not accidental, but deliberate. Slow punishments amplify fear not only in the victim, but in the audience. They create stories that spread, stories that discourage dissent. And that may be the real power behind the legend of Scaphism. When we study dark history, it is tempting to focus on shock value. But deeper questions matter more. What kind of political system resorts to such punishment? What message is being sent? Who benefits from the story? The Persian Empire, despite its portrayal in some Greek sources, was also known for administrative sophistication, infrastructure, and relative tolerance compared to some other ancient powers. It allowed various cultures and religions within its territory to maintain traditions. It built roads, standardized systems of governance, and maintained one of the most efficient imperial networks of its time. This complexity makes the narrative even more intriguing. Civilizations are rarely purely monstrous or purely enlightened. They are mixtures of progress and brutality, innovation and repression. Scaphism, whether entirely factual or partially exaggerated, represents the darker edge of imperial power. And we must be careful not to fall into a simplistic narrative that paints one culture as uniquely cruel. Nearly every ancient civilization practiced some form of harsh punishment. Rome had crucifixion. Assyria left records of brutal reprisals against enemies. Medieval Europe developed its own methods of torture and execution. The difference often lies not in whether cruelty existed, but in how it was recorded and remembered. The Greek historians who wrote about Persia had audiences to persuade. By emphasizing Persian cruelty, they reinforced a sense of moral superiority. This phenomenon is not unique to antiquity. Throughout history, rival nations have exaggerated each other's brutality to justify conflict, conquest, or prejudice. That is why studying Scaphism is not just about one execution method. It is about understanding how narratives are shaped. Even today, sensational stories spread faster than nuanced truths. The more shocking the detail, the more memorable it becomes. Over centuries, retellings can amplify elements, smoothing over uncertainty and strengthening drama. So when you hear that Scaphism lasted weeks, ask yourself, who recorded this? When? For what purpose? Critical thinking is part of responsible history. At the same time, we must not dismiss the suffering of ancient people simply because sources are imperfect. Severe punishments did exist. Treason in ancient empires was often met with extreme responses. Rulers believed that visible deterrence preserved order. But history has taught us something crucial. Cruelty does not guarantee stability. Fear may suppress rebellion temporarily, but it also breeds resentment. Empires rise and fall not only by military strength, but by legitimacy. Over time, philosophical developments challenged the morality of extreme punishment. Ideas about human dignity, rights, and proportional justice evolved. These ideas were not universal in antiquity, but they grew gradually through centuries of debate and reform. Today, international law explicitly prohibits torture and cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. The global consensus, at least in principle, is that punishment must respect basic human dignity. And yet, dark history reminds us that such principles were hard-won. They did not emerge automatically. They were shaped by witnessing and rejecting the worst of human behavior. Scaphism stands as a symbol of that darkness. Whether fully accurate in every detail or partially shaped by propaganda, it captures a timeless truth. Unchecked power can rationalize extreme cruelty. That truth matters, because the lesson of Scaphism is not that ancient Persia was uniquely evil. It is that any society, when driven by fear, revenge, or absolute authority, can justify suffering in the name of order. The past is not a distant planet populated by monsters. It is a continuum of human choices. The same psychological mechanisms that allowed ancient rulers to authorize brutal punishments, dehumanization, justification, political gain, still exist today in different forms. When we study stories like Scaphism, we are not indulging in horror for entertainment. We are examining warning signs. We are asking, how do we prevent cruelty from becoming normalized? How do we hold power accountable? How do we ensure that punishment remains just rather than vindictive? The image of a person trapped between boats, exposed to the elements, slowly deteriorating, it lingers. It unsettles, but perhaps that discomfort is necessary. Because history is not meant to comfort us, it is meant to teach us. Scaphism forces us to confront the extremes of human imagination. It reminds us that civilization and cruelty have often coexisted, that progress is fragile, that empathy must be defended. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that stories themselves are powerful. They shape reputations, they influence perceptions across centuries. So the next time you hear about the most brutal execution in history, pause before accepting it at face value. Investigate the source, examine the context. Separate documented evidence from dramatic retelling. Dark history is not about glorifying suffering. It is about understanding it and learning from it. Whether Scaphism lasted 17 days or became exaggerated through centuries of storytelling, its legacy is clear. It stands as a cautionary tale about power without restraint. And that is the true reason we study it, not to marvel at cruelty, but to ensure that, as a species, we continue moving away from it, not toward it.